President Obama finally is acting like the Islamic State is something to be at least concerned about. President Obama, who just mere months ago said Iraq was stable and self-sufficient, who pulled all of our troops out of Iraq against the advice of all of his advisors, every single one. That includes the lunatic leftist advisors he surrounds himself with. That includes the generals on the ground. President Obama, for political reasons, abandoned Iraq, and now that his numbers are in the tank, for political reasons, is going back in. Hello friends, how are you? Thanks once again for listening in to this, The Ray Warner Show. I am your host, Ray Warner. Thank you so much for listening. As always, you may feel free to email the show. If you have questions or comments, or you just need to rant or vent, let me have it. Or you can send me your music request. The email address is theraywarnershow@gmail.com. America is safer. Those words were spoken by Barack I himself during his my poll numbers are at a record low, so I better do something to stop the bleeding speech. Yes, he actually said that. Here's the proof.
Thanks to our military and counterterrorism professionals, America is safer.
See, he throws our military in there and figures nobody will argue with him. But the truth is, thanks to our military, Iraq was won, Mr. President. We won. Thanks to our military, under the leadership of George W. Bush, Iraq was freed from a brutal dictator, and an elected government was set up, thanks to our military. Iraqis proudly displayed the ink on their finger, thanks to the military. Not thanks to you, though, Mr. President. Thanks to you, and thanks to your political decision to abandon Iraq, city after city in Iraq is falling to ISIS. City after city that our military bled and died for. City after city that our military lost life and limb for. But on to the big gaffe. America is safer. Safer than what? What has he done to make America safer? Was it when he moved the Border Patrol back 45 miles off the Mexican border? Is that what made America safer? Tens of thousands of people are flooding over the border. We are capturing record numbers of people from the Middle East. From Syria and Yemen and Pakistan. Is that why we're safer? Remember when Rick Perry invited Barack I to the border and he refused to go? Instead, he was up in Colorado drinking beer and shooting pool. I believe he would have gone. Obama wouldn't pass up a photo op where he gets to look like the president. I think whoever is in charge of his security wouldn't let him go. They have no idea who is down there or who has crossed the border and carrying what. They couldn't possibly secure a place for him to go near that border. That's why he didn't go. But he says America is safer. Does it matter to Obama that they are threatening the homeland? I'll see you in New York. What does that mean? Does that mean we're safer? Soon we will raise our flag over the White House. That must mean America is safer too. A couple of weeks ago, they posted a picture taken in Chicago and said, "We will soon be passing by here," or something like that. Remember that? But America is safer. America is not safer, Mr. President, and thanks to you, our homeland is more vulnerable than ever. They are here, in the United States. We know they are taking advantage of your refusal to do your job and secure the border. Not only that, you can't even correctly define the enemy. Obama refuses to recognize the source of the threat.
At this moment, the greatest threats come from the Middle East and North Africa, where radical groups exploit grievances for their own gain. And one of those groups is ISIL, which calls itself the Islamic State. Now let's make two things clear. ISIL is not Islamic.
I wonder what the Islamic State thought when they found out they were not Islamic. If they're not Islamic, what are they? Let's see, they follow the Quran, they enforce Sharia, they praise Muhammad, the Prophet, and they do everything in the name of Allah. So what are they, Jehovah's Witness? If they're not Islamic, what does all that make them, Buddhist? Of course they're Islamic. What do you think the first I in ISIS stands for? Or the first I in ISIL, as you insist on calling them, just to stick it to Israel. Did you know that, by the way? Notice he always says ISIL. The media, they put up their little graphic and it says ISIS, or the crawler will say ISIS. And the media will ask him a question about ISIS and he'll answer using ISIL. Because ISIS is the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, which is what they are. And ISIL refers to a greater land area known as the Levant. That's what the L in ISIL means. And that includes Israel. So he likes to use that. And I think just to stick it to Israel. I usually just say Islamists or Islamic State or Islamic threat because that's what they call themselves. They call themselves the Islamic State. I don't recognize them as a legitimate state, but that's what they call themselves. I mean, we didn't recognize East Germany either, but we called it East Germany. Anyway, then he said this.
No religion condones the killing of innocents.
He says no religion condones the killing of innocents. I've looked into this, and you should too. The Quran says to fight and eliminate, as it puts the fitna, which is the unbelievers. Anyone that doesn't believe the Quran or Muhammad or Allah is part of the fitna that is to be destroyed. Here, I'll quote it for you. It says, and fight with them until there is no more fitna, and religion should be only for Allah. That's in the Quran. It also says in there to deal with them so as to strike fear in those that are behind them. Is that not terrorism? To intentionally, actively deal with them in order to strike fear for the people behind them? That's probably what the beheading's all about. Over and over in the Quran, there is a call for fighting and killing anyone who does not believe. So yes, Mr. President, there is a religion that not only condones, but supports and calls for the killing of innocents. It's all right there in the Quran. And these people are not shy about telling us their intentions. We just have to be smart enough to hear and understand the threat and respond to it with full force. And it appears that Obama is doing just that. But remember, it just appears that way. As designed to just before the elections. We'll see what happens after November. And another question is, are we at war or not? There seems to be some confusion about this. When asked if we were at war, John Kerry said this.
Is the United States at war? Sounds from the president's speech that we are.
I think that's the wrong terminology. What we are doing is engaging in a very significant counterterrorism operation. And it's going to go on for some period of time. If somebody wants to think about it as being at war with ISIL, they can do so. But the fact is, it's a major counterterrorism operation that will have many different moving parts.
So he will not call what we're doing a war. And as near as I can figure, this has to be because the administration doesn't want to have to go to Congress. So by not calling it a war, I mean, the president has authority to respond in certain situations, but to actually call it a war, constitutionally, only Congress can declare war. And, this is interesting, only because, what does Obama care, seriously, about going to Congress for anything, or following the Constitution, or respecting the rule of law, or any of that? I would think this would be one of those things he would want to take to Congress, if for no other reason than to get their fingerprints on it. He has to know it's going to end badly. We had 30,000 troops for years training an Iraqi army that dropped their guns, took off their uniforms, and ran at the first sign of trouble. And he thinks 475 non-combatant troops are going to go over there and fix all that in 2 weeks? This is a counterterrorism operation with many moving parts, but it's not a war. And then Susan Rice went on CNN with Wolf Blitzer.
Is the United States at war right now with ISIS?
Well, Wolf, as the president said very clearly last night, we're going to do what is necessary to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL. And so that's going to entail a comprehensive approach. On the one hand, as the president made clear, we'll be involved in sustained airstrikes against ISIL targets in Iraq and, to the extent necessary, in Syria. We'll also be building up the capacity of partners on the ground, the Iraqi security forces, our Kurdish partners, and also, with the support of Congress, we hope, the moderate Syrian opposition. So we will combine that with a political strategy in support of inclusive and representative governance in Iraq. We will also support the Sunni elements inside of Iraq to take the fight to ISIL, since they are the ones most directly affected by the ISIL terrorism. And so this will be a political, diplomatic, as well as military strategy. It'll involve partners in a broad coalition from the countries in the region who met today in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, with Secretary Kerry and pledged to support this effort, to our partners in Europe and Australia and others in the West. It'll be a broad coalition to deal with the threat that ISIL poses.
So you know it's a bunch of garbage. Susan Rice, whenever they send Susan Rice out there, that means they have something really dumb to say. And it's like she's the only one willing to go out there and do it. Now, if you'll notice, she was asked a yes or no question.
Is the United States at war right now with ISIS?
And spoke for over a minute without answering it. So Wolf asked it again.
It sounds like a war to me. Is it fair to call it a war?
Well, Wolf, I don't know whether you want to call it a war or a sustained counterterrorism campaign, or I think, frankly, this is a counterterrorism operation that will take time. It will be sustained. We will not have American combat forces on the ground fighting as we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, which is what I think the American people think of when they think of a war. So I think this is very different from that. But nonetheless, we'll be dealing with a significant threat to the region, to American personnel in the region, and potentially also to Europe and the United States. And we'll be doing it with partners. We will not be fighting ourselves on the ground, but we will be using American air power, as we have been over the last several weeks, as necessary.
So it's a war, maybe, but definitely a counterterrorism operation. It's political, it's diplomatic. I mean, they're being so vague, and I think that's intentional. They don't want to use the word war because then the rabid, insane kook left just has a complete come apart. So they throw the word war out there, for the real patriots to hear, but they won't commit to it. See, then they describe it as some kind of vague, diplomatic, political coalition-driven thing. And you know why? It's because that way, later, they can just redefine it however they want, depending on either the outcome or the next poll or the next focus group test or after the election. I mean, whatever the political winds are calling for, they can morph this into it. But whatever this thing is, it already has a serious identity crisis. And what the heck is ISIL? She keeps saying ISIL. Obama says ISIL. She says ISIL. They can't even get together on that. Don't they have meetings? Don't they hear each other? When she first started, she said ISIL first, and then every time after that, she said ISIL, ISIL, ISIL. She must the first ISIL must have been a slip. That is to somehow be intentional also. Press Secretary Josh Earnest, he was also asked about this. He was asked about what victory would look like.
What does a victory look like here? I mean, you've talked about destroying ISIL. I honestly don't know what that means. What does it mean?
I didn't bring my Webster's dictionary with me up here. I think that, it's only...
You guys keep talking about that. I understood it when he said...
I think that's a pretty illustrative phrase to use to describe the situation that we envision.
What a funny guy, huh? Didn't bring his dictionary. Listen to the rest of his answer.
We've talked about the threat that ISIL poses in the context of foreign fighters. We've talked about the threat that ISIL poses in the context of gaining the kind of safe haven that would allow them to plot and carry out conspiracies that could lead to catastrophic attacks on the West or even on the American homeland. Those are the two principal threats that we are concerned about as it relates directly to American national security. There are other interests that we have here. There's clearly the ISIL forces wreaking havoc in this already volatile region of the world is not in our best interest. And we have, therefore, an interest in acting with the international community to try to stabilize the situation. We can do that in a way that doesn't require the introduction of American ground combat troops to Iraq or Syria, but rather we can deploy a tried and true counterterrorism strategy that this administration has used successfully in other contexts. And essentially that means building up support for fighters on the ground, ramping up our support to Iraqi and Kurdish security forces, and ramping up our support to Syrian opposition fighters. It means building an international coalition, and it means using selectively American military might to aid those fighters who are taking the fight to the terror elements on the ground in their own country. And ultimately, that is the strategy that we're using to accomplish this broader goal of degrading and ultimately destroying ISIL.
So these guys are bad. They're a threat to the homeland. They're a threat to the area. They're a threat to the Middle East. And what we're going to do is go in and we're going to ramp up support. We're going to use air power. We're going to build a coalition, yada, yada, yada. You know, again, just vague. It's classic Obama is what it is. It's like Obama voting present. You know, just don't pin it down. That way it can be whatever it needs to be at any given moment. You know, it can just morph and shape and twist into whatever we need it to be, depending on how public opinion shifts for one reason or another. Oh, and one more thing. I like how they keep saying broad coalition.
This will be with partners and U.S. air power, and indeed a coalition that is unprecedented.
This broad coalition is unprecedented. You got 9 countries. That's their broad coalition. And of those 9, Britain is not a member. Neither is Germany. President Bush had 40 countries in his coalition. Obama can barely muster 9. That's unprecedented, all right. Never before has so few hoped to accomplish so much in so little time. We'll be right back. I'm Ray Warner. Keep it here.
Keep it right here at The Ray Warner Show.
Yes! I am invincible!
You have reached the Bovine Chicken Chat Line, where you can chat with tons and tons of cows about chicken. All our cows are busy. While you're waiting, why not get to know some of these fuzzy fans of chicken? Heifer 9672 is a 1,200-pounder from Kentucky who likes long walks in the pasture, watching cars go by from the pasture, and eating the pasture. She's also an aspiring author, writing a book called The Burgers of Wrath. Bull 5441 is a bull from Chicago with a pierced nose and a nasty temper. But he loves people who eat chicken and the good folks at Chick-fil-A who make the chicken. Bull 5441's pet peeves are cow tipping and the color red, especially when it's meat. All our cows are still busy. Please try calling the Bovine Chicken Chat Line later. The cows thank you for calling and for not eating burgers. This call made possible by Chick-fil-A.
Israel, a nation born of liberty, freedom, and hope. America's unwavering friend. Israel is now fighting for its survival against an enemy who thinks nothing of sacrificing Palestinian women and children as human shields.
Hamas is using its own children as human shields.
A nearby mosque is boasting about rockets being fired at Jerusalem, at Tel Aviv, at Haifa.
It's hard to comprehend, but it's true. As Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said, here's the difference. We're using missile defense to protect our civilians, and they're using their civilians to protect their missiles. Hamas thinks nothing of killing innocent Israelis and Americans. Hamas took billions in humanitarian aid meant for schools and hospitals and used the money for the tools of war, terror tunnels, and weapons. Stand up to this outrage. Make your voice heard. Visit StopHamasNow.com and sign our petition.
Welcome back, boys and girls. Thank you for listening to this, The Ray Warner Show. I'm your host, Ray Warner. The email address is theraywarnershow@gmail.com. You know, the rest of Obama's speech, he sounded very presidential. I mean, he almost had me convinced. Listen to some of what he said in that speech.
I know many Americans are concerned about these threats. Tonight, I want you to know that the United States of America is meeting them with strength and resolve. Our objective is clear. We will degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL through a comprehensive and sustained counterterrorism strategy. We will hunt down terrorists who threaten our country wherever they are. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven. This is American leadership at its best. This counterterrorism campaign will be waged through a steady, relentless effort. I see the grit and determination and common goodness of the American people every single day. We stand for freedom, for justice, for dignity. These are values that have guided our nation since its founding. I do so as a commander-in-chief who could not be prouder of our men and women in uniform. And our own safety, our own security, depends upon our willingness to do what it takes to defend this nation and uphold the values that we stand for, that will endure long after those who offer only hate and destruction have been vanquished from the earth. May God bless our troops, and may God bless the United States of America.
Meeting threats with strength and resolve, our objective is clear. He talked about core principles, American leadership at its best, steady and relentless, grit and determination, America's blessings, America's responsibility to lead, freedom, justice, dignity, safety, and security. These are timeless ideals. What did they do? Consult a speechwriter from the Reagan administration? Or maybe they must have found a speech, like from George W. Bush, just stuffed in the bottom of one of the drawers of the Resolute desk. Either way, great stuff, inspiring stuff, real presidential stuff. The only problem is we all know that he himself doesn't believe a word of it. But the worse the poll numbers get, the further to the right he has to go, or at least he has to sound, for damage control. The only problem I had with the speech is the same problem I had with Gaff Machine Biden. Remember when he was saying, we'll chase them to the gates of hell? Hell is where they will reside. See, the problem I have is the speaker. I just doubt this administration has what it takes to see this through. Liberals say things they don't believe all the time. John Kerry, just the other day, tried to use the Bible. I just love it when liberals try to refer to the Bible to prove a point. Does John Kerry really believe the Bible? Secretary of State John Kerry lately has been ratcheting up rhetoric on global warming. If you'll remember, it was early this year, February, I think, John Kerry said that global warming was as big a threat to the world as terrorism, poverty, and weapons of mass destruction. Then, about a month ago, he said global warming was the biggest of all challenges that we face. Never mind the Islamic threat, Russia, China, Hamas, never mind all of that. He has tightened his tinfoil hat so much that he thinks global warming is not only true, but the biggest challenge we face. And just recently, he made a statement at an event where a lawyer, one Sharik Zafar, was appointed to represent Muslims or the Muslim communities. And John Kerry said this.
When Sharik started drafting the U.S. strategy on religious leader and faith community engagement, he began with two words: religion matters. We're making that a mantra here at the State Department in our foreign policy. Our fates are inextricably linked on any number of things that we must confront and deal with in policy concepts today. Our fates are inextricably linked on the environment. For many of us, respect for God's creation also translates into a duty to protect and sustain His first creation, Earth, the planet. Before God created man, He created heavens and earth. Confronting climate change is, in the long run, one of the greatest challenges that we face. And you can see this duty or responsibility laid out in scriptures, clearly, beginning in Genesis. And Muslim majority countries are among the most vulnerable. Our response to this challenge ought to be rooted in a sense of stewardship of earth. And for me and for many of us here today, that responsibility comes from God.
I don't know what's worse, the fact that John Kerry said that, or the fact that he said it out loud and into a microphone and in front of a room full of people that he knew were listening. I am embarrassed for him. This is The Ray Warner Show. Stay there. We'll be right back.
wrong with me. Maybe there's something wrong with the universe.
I came home last night and my door was smashed open. It's like they knew right where to go. Like they'd been in my house before. They got my cameras, the silver, the coins. My husband's beautiful old shotgun. They took my jewelry. I can't believe it. It's all gone.
Each year, more than 4 million homes are burglarized in the U.S. Keep your valuables safe and secure with a safe that gives you an extra margin of protection. A Liberty safe is built tough and offers the most technologically advanced security features available. Plus, Liberty safes are independently certified for residential security, and they're built right here in the U.S. Don't take a chance when it comes to your home security. Purchase a Liberty safe for the things you value most.
Some things can be replaced. Some just can't.
To learn more, go to libertysafe.com.
Come to the Holy Land and walk in the footsteps of Jesus. From Nazareth to the birthplace of his ministry, the shores of Galilee. Stand where he stood. Be baptized in the Jordan River. Hallelujah, he is everlasting. Ask your pastor or visit goisrael.com to learn more about making the journey that will transform your faith in God and his word. Experience Israel. You'll never be the same.
Well, the Democrats' way of running this country is to go tell us all how we ought to make sacrifices. God, they're great on that stuff. But they're all going to have us over the hill to the poorhouse. We ain't going to be able to drive over there because we ain't got no gas, so we're going to have to walk it.
Oh, the Reader's Digest says walking is very good for you.
Oh, ain't that lovely? The Reader's Digest can always put a little joy into poverty.
All right, welcome back. This is The Ray Warner Show. I am Ray Warner, and you can email me at theraywarnershow@gmail.com. And where was I? Oh, yeah. Here's what we know about global warming. The left likes to say 97% of climate change scientists believe in global warming. Now, right away, there's a problem. See, they make the claim 97% of climate change scientists. What? What do you mean 97%? You mean you can't even get all of your tinfoil hat-wearing climate change scientists to agree? How come it's not 100% of those fools? The truth is 12 out of 13 scientists in general know that global warming is a hoax. But see, the left won't tell you that. They like their other statistic. Hey, we asked ourselves, and 97% of us agree global warming is real, man. What a joke. We also know there hasn't been any warming for almost 20 years. The natural and normal cyclical temperature change seems to now be on the ever so slight downward trend. We also know a lot of the weather reporting stations are not working properly, and when they don't receive data, these lefties just make it up. We also know when they do receive data from one of these weather reporting stations, it can't be trusted because they put the thermometers, by power generators and by exhaust manifolds. They put them behind glass. They put them where they will register high. And we also know that the hockey stick graph, remember that? The famous hockey stick graph, that it was completely made up. They predict global warming based on computer models, not science, not on reality. On models generated with their bogus data entered. What do you think they're going to get? They can't tell you what the temperature will be tomorrow, let alone 100 years from now. And of course, we also know for a fact that they conspire with each other on how to lie and cover it all up. I mean, we have the emails that prove that. So we know this is a bunch of crap. It's all made up. It is a hoax, and the only purpose the whole scam serves is to generate some kind of government action that's designed to tax and control you and me. I'll tell you what global warming is not. It is not a challenge we are commanded by God to face and to protect Muslim countries. I can't believe he said something so stupid. What Bible is he reading? He really thinks God commanded Adam and Eve, rule the earth and subdue it. Be fruitful and multiply. Don't eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And, protect the Muslims from global warming. If John Kerry wants to talk about Genesis, let's talk about Genesis. Let's talk about where the earth came from. Was it the voice of God or the Big Bang? You know, we live in a universe, right, Mr. Kerry? Universe. The definition of universe is a single spoken word. Chew on that for a while, Mr. Kerry. Genesis also says God created man in his image from the dust of the ground. So goodbye Darwin and the lie of evolution. Please, people, homeschool your children because they're being taught that evolution is true in schools. And, I couldn't agree with you more, Mr. Kerry. I am so glad you brought up Genesis. It also explains what marriage is. A man leaving his mother and father and cleaving to his wife. That's marriage. It's a God-instituted union between one man and one woman. Genesis explains how sin entered a perfect creation and that the seed of the woman would deal with it for us. It explains how God wiped out an entire civilization through a worldwide flood and how 8 people were saved on an ark that he instructed on how to build. That's right, Mr. Kerry. At one point in time, water covered this entire planet to wipe out an evil civilization. Genesis also explains why we have many languages and how those languages separated into different nations. It also records the absolute destruction and judgment of 2 cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, 2 cities that had fallen into the sin of homosexuality. They were destroyed for it. And the book of Genesis is how we know for a fact that Israel belongs to the Jews, or more specifically, the Hebrews, from Abraham through Isaac and Jacob. And it was Jacob who was actually renamed Israel, and his 12 sons were the 12 tribes of Israel. So, you want to talk about Genesis, Mr. Kerry? I am so glad you brought that up. Let's talk about Genesis. And folks, sadly, that's going to be it. That's all the time for this week. I want to thank you all again for listening. Thank you so much. This is The Ray Warner Show. I am your host, Ray Warner. If you want, you can email me your questions, your comments, or just rant or vent. The email address is theraywarnershow@gmail.com. We'll be back next Saturday. Have a good week. See ya.